Welcome to Ghostly Tales, where the unexplained is brought to life. Tonight, we're venturing deep into places most people would rather forget, houses where the past never rests, where whispers follow you from room to room, and where shadows seem to know your name. Every tale you're about to hear is rooted in real accounts, drawn from police records, local archives, interviews, and whispered folklore passed down in small towns. Some are tragedies, some are warnings, but all of them will force you to ask, what truly makes a house a home? Is it the people who live inside, or the memories and entities that refuse to leave? Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed to Ghostly Tales and hit the notification bell. What we reveal today might rewrite everything you thought you knew about the supernatural. Stay with us, because the real terror is just beginning. GT 101, The Screams of Waverley House. Waverley House sat at the far end of Maple Street, just outside the lights of town. Overgrown hedges strangled the walkway, and the windows, always dark, always cold, seemed to watch anyone who passed by. The locals said the house was cursed. And like all cursed places, no family ever lasted. Some left quietly, their belongings piled into trucks in the dead of night. Others fled mid-dinner, never returning for their plates. The first detailed account dates back to 1953, when Thomas and Evelyn Carter moved in with their two young children. The house was cheap, too cheap, and for a while, they thought they had won some hidden lottery. The first night was quiet. The second, too. But by the end of the first week, Evelyn swore she heard something in the attic. It wasn't footsteps, not exactly. It was a cry. At first, Thomas dismissed it. Old houses creak, Evie. That's all it is. But then he heard it too, a scream. High-pitched, desperate, tearing through the silence. Neighbors later reported they also heard the cries, sometimes around midnight, drifting out into the street. One woman said it was like listening to a child being hurt but never saved. The Carter's daughter, only 8 years old, confided in her teacher, "The lady in the attic tucked me in last night." She described a woman with long hair, gray skin, and hands that smelled of smoke. Disturbed, the teacher called the parents. Within weeks, the Carters abandoned the house. They left dishes in the sink, a half-baked pie in the oven. They never came back for their clothes. Years later, when a group of local investigators entered the attic, they found scratches along the beams. Not small marks, deep gouges, as though someone had clawed at the wood trying to escape. The screams of Waverley House have never stopped. Some say it's the ghost of a woman burned alive. Others claim it's an echo of violence we'll never understand. But one thing is certain, the house doesn't want to be silent. But Waverley House wasn't the only home where fear became a tenant. Across the country, on an ordinary street, another haunting would leave 3 roommates questioning their sanity. GT 102, The Vanishing Roommate of Elm Street. It was 1979, in a college town in Ohio. 3 students, barely in their 20s, pooled their money to rent a small, aging house on Elm Street. The rent was cheap, the distance to campus short, the perfect student dream. But they soon learned that not everything affordable comes without a cost. The first oddities were minor. Milk left in the fridge disappeared overnight. Footsteps echoed in the upstairs hallway, though they swore they were all downstairs together. The students, practical and young, laughed it off. Probably mice. or one of us sleepwalking. But then came the night when David, one of the roommates, woke to the feeling of being watched. At the far corner of his room stood a woman, pale skin, long hair, dressed in a faded nightgown. Her eyes did not meet his. She was staring at the wall. David screamed, his roommates rushed in, and the figure was gone. The bed was damp with his sweat, and the air smelled faintly of earth, like freshly dug soil. Over the following weeks, each of the three saw her. Sometimes she stood in the kitchen, whispering words they couldn't understand. Sometimes she hovered at the foot of their beds, hands clasped, as though in mourning. When they asked around, neighbors reluctantly told them the truth: a woman had once lived in that house, decades earlier. She vanished one night, leaving dinner half-cooked on the stove. Her body was never found. Was the figure a restless spirit, trying to be seen? Or was she something else, a shadow caught between worlds? No one ever stayed in the Elm Street house long enough to find out. Today, the home is gone, demolished. But the land where it stood still gives locals chills. If seeing an apparition unsettles the soul, what happens when a house itself begins to turn against its owners? That's exactly what unfolded at Hollowbrook Farm. GT 103, the possession at Hollowbrook Farm. In rural Pennsylvania, the Dawson family thought they had found their perfect escape. Hollowbrook Farm, a sprawling property with acres of green fields, looked like a slice of paradise. But in the shadows of its barns and behind the walls of its farmhouse, something waited. It began subtly. The family noticed an acrid smell at night, sulfur, rotting eggs, sometimes even burning hair. Then, without explanation, their animals began dying. First, a goat. Then 3 chickens. Then an entire row of cattle. No wounds. No poison. Just lifeless bodies. Soon after, their youngest son, barely 9 years old, began to change. He spoke in voices not his own, deep, guttural, in languages his parents didn't recognize. At night, he was hurled from his bed by invisible hands. His arms bore scratches, deep welts that appeared before his mother's eyes. Desperate, the Dawsons contacted clergy. The first priest prayed with them, only to flee when a crucifix in his hand grew hot enough to scorch his palm. A second attempt was made weeks later. During the exorcism, the boy convulsed, his eyes rolling back, his voice shouting in Latin, "This house is mine." The Dawsons left within a month. They never returned for their belongings. To this day, Hollowbrook Farm remains abandoned, the barn collapsing into itself. Local teenagers dare one another to spend the night there. Some come back claiming they heard growls in the dark. Others refuse to talk about what happened at all. Some believe the land itself is cursed. Others whisper about a deal struck long ago, one that damned not just the farm, but all who tried to live upon it. 3 hauntings, each darker than the last. But the terror only grows. Because in Massachusetts, a mansion still stands, one so haunted, even seasoned investigators have refused to enter. GT 104, the shadows of Blackwood Mansion. Blackwood Mansion rose above the Massachusetts coastline like a crown of stone. Built in the late 1800s by a shipping magnate whose fortune was as vast as his ego, it once hosted galas, parties, and laughter that echoed through its halls. But by the mid-20th century, the laughter was gone. The mansion was left to rot, its ballrooms filled not with music, but with silence and shadows. Locals told stories of trespassers who entered the grand ballroom and saw an impossible sight: men in press suits, women in gowns, frozen mid-dance. Then, in the blink of an eye, they dissolved into smoke. In the 1970s, a group of paranormal investigators placed cameras throughout the house. One recording showed a tall silhouette passing across the wall, though no one was present. An EVP captured a chilling phrase, "Get out." But perhaps the most terrifying story came from a caretaker hired in the 1980s. He lasted only one night. He told friends he was pinned to the floor by unseen hands, his chest so heavy he thought he would suffocate. His screams echoed in the empty halls, but no one came to help. By dawn, he was gone, never to return. Today, the mansion is sealed. Its windows are boarded, its doors chained. Yet locals swear that if you walk past on a foggy night, you'll see shadows moving behind the glass, shadows of people who have long since died. Blackwood Mansion feels less like a home and more like a gathering place for souls unwilling to move on. Was it cursed by its owner's greed, or simply doomed to trap those who entered? But ballrooms of ghosts are only one kind of haunting. Some houses twist reality itself, pulling you into a nightmare you can never escape. GT 105, The Endless Hallway of Rosewood House. On a quiet suburban street in Kentucky stood Rosewood House. From the outside, it looked like any other home: red brick walls, white shutters, and a freshly painted door. But for those who dared to live inside, it was a maze, one that never seemed to end. The Millers, a family of 4, moved into Rosewood in the early 1990s. At first, it seemed ordinary. The children rode bikes in the driveway, the parents unpacked boxes. But within days, Mrs. Miller began noticing something strange about the upstairs hallway. It didn't add up. She would walk down it to fetch laundry, but the corridor felt longer than it should. Some nights, she counted 5 doors on one side, though the floor plan showed only 3 bedrooms. One evening, after putting the children to bed, she wandered into the hallway and found a door she had never seen before. Curious, she opened it. Behind it was not a room, but another hallway, darker, colder, stretching endlessly into blackness. She tried to step inside, but the air pressed against her chest, thick and suffocating, until she stumbled back. The next morning, the door was gone. In its place was just an unbroken wall. The children began waking up screaming, insisting they had gotten lost in the hallway. One claimed he walked for hours and ended up back in the same room where he started. Another swore he saw another mommy waiting for him at the end of the corridor, smiling, but not the same. The breaking point came when Mrs. Miller wandered too far one night. She walked and walked, doors multiplying on either side. Footsteps followed her. When she finally turned, she saw her own reflection, standing there, smiling when she wasn't. The family moved out within 6 months. They never sold the house. It remains empty to this day, shutters rattling in the wind, hallway waiting for another soul. Rosewood House poses a terrifying question: can a building itself become alive, reshaping its bones to trap those inside? If Rosewood House twisted space and time, our next tale brings us something more violent, the haunting where the walls themselves became weapons. GT 106, The Poltergeist of Brackenridge Estate. Deep in the English countryside, Brackenridge Estate was a sprawling manor inherited by a young couple in 2002. To them, it was a dream, until that dream shattered into shards of fear. The activity began innocently. A teacup fell from a shelf. A door slammed in the wind. But soon, the disturbances became violent. Plates hurled themselves across rooms, smashing into walls. Heavy chairs toppled over while no one touched them. The husband reported being struck in the head by a thick leather-bound book that flew from a shelf. His wife found him bleeding, dazed on the floor. The couple invited neighbors over, desperate to prove they weren't imagining things. Together, they watched as a cup slid slowly across the table, then flew off, smashing against the wall. Scratches appeared on the wallpaper, deep, jagged lines spelling out words no one recognized. The most horrifying incident involved their dog. One night, as the couple and two neighbors sat in the parlor, the animal lifted into the air, suspended by unseen hands, then thrown across the room. The dog survived, but cowered from that day onward, refusing to enter the house again. Paranormal experts later confirmed the haunting was a poltergeist, a violent spirit feeding on chaos. The couple's marriage collapsed under the strain. Within a year, the estate was abandoned. Today, the manor still stands, overgrown and silent. But those who pass by say they sometimes hear smashing glass echoing from within. Poltergeists are the most dangerous of hauntings. They do not simply show themselves, they attack. And at Brackenridge Estate, that violence tore a family apart. 6 homes, 6 terrifying truths. Yet none compare to the cursed house of Willow Lane, a place so feared, the entire town kept its distance. GT 107, the cursed house on Willow Lane. In a small Louisiana town, hidden behind tall oaks, stood a modest white house on Willow Lane. From the outside, it looked harmless. But every local knew its story, and every local stayed away. The Harris family were the first to suffer. In 1924, weeks after moving in, the father drowned in shallow water. His death was ruled accidental, but whispers said otherwise. The next family to arrive lost their youngest child to a sudden, unexplained illness. Then came the Lamberts, whose home mysteriously burned down, though no fire touched the neighboring houses. Each new occupant faced disaster, financial ruin, accidents, or worse. By the 1970s, the house was abandoned. But one drifter, seeking shelter, forced his way inside. He was found days later wandering the streets, filthy and raving. Witnesses said he mumbled about faces in the walls and a woman who whispers death. He never recovered. Locals claimed the house radiated a chill that seeped into the bones. Even in the sweltering Louisiana summer, the grass around it withered. Some believed dark rituals had been performed on the land, curses etched deep into its soil. The house still stands, boarded up, untouched. Not because no one wants it, but because no one dares. The cursed house of Willow Lane teaches us that sometimes, hauntings aren't about spirits at all. Sometimes, it's the land itself that drinks tragedy and bleeds misfortune into anyone who dares to stay. But not all hauntings are curses. Some are grief, echoing endlessly in the halls where sorrow first took root. That's the story of Lancaster House. GT 108, the Weeping Woman of Lancaster House. Lancaster House in Virginia is beautiful in the daylight, red shutters, white columns, ivy creeping up its brick walls. But at night, it becomes something else. A place not of peace, but of sorrow. For one sound defines this house above all others, the sound of a woman crying. The story begins during the Civil War. The house served as a field hospital, its rooms filled with soldiers broken and bleeding. Among the nurses was a young woman named Eliza. Records say she lost her husband in battle, and within days, received word her son had also died of fever. Overcome with grief, Eliza took her own life in an upstairs bedroom. Since then, every family who has lived in Lancaster House reports the same thing. At night, soft sobbing begins. Sometimes it's faint, just a whisper in the hallway. Other times, it grows into full-bodied wails that shake the windows. Guests have claimed to see her, a woman in a blood-stained apron, clutching a folded letter to her chest, tears running down her cheeks. When approached, she vanishes into thin air, leaving only the sound of crying behind. Paranormal investigators have captured her voice on tape. One recording is especially chilling. You can hear a woman sobbing, then, clear as day, a whisper, "Why did you leave me?" Lancaster House reminds us that grief can echo across centuries. Eliza's sorrow was so deep, it became a permanent part of the home itself. If grief can linger forever, what about rage? Our next story takes us to a cabin in Oregon where anger never died, and violence never stopped. GT-109, The Angry Spirit of Pine Hollow Cabin. Tucked deep in the Oregon woods stands Pine Hollow Cabin. From the outside, it's unremarkable, a sagging roof, moss-covered logs, windows cracked with age. But locals refuse to approach it. Because the cabin doesn't just scare, it attacks. In 1931, the owner of the cabin committed a crime so brutal it's still whispered about. He murdered his wife and children inside those very walls, claiming voices told him to do it. Afterward, he took his own life in the loft above the fireplace. Since then, campers and hikers who stumbled across the cabin have reported terrifying encounters. One man claimed he was grabbed by the throat and slammed against the wall, held there until he nearly blacked out. Another swore unseen claws scratched his arms as he tried to sleep inside. Paranormal groups brought equipment, but most never stayed long. Those who did recorded growls, low, animalistic sounds, with no source. Thermometers spiked and dropped without reason. Objects flew across the room. Perhaps most disturbing are the reports of people leaving the cabin with bite marks on their skin, though no animal was ever found inside. Pine Hollow Cabin is not haunted by sorrow or sadness. It is haunted by rage. An anger so deep, so violent, it still lashes out at anyone who dares to enter. And yet, for all its violence, Pine Hollow Cabin is still just a place on a map. Our final story is something stranger, a house that appears and disappears, a house that shouldn't exist at all. GT-110, The House That Shouldn't Exist. On the edge of Arizona's desert highways, travelers whisper about a house that doesn't belong. It has no address, no records, no deed. People say it appears one night, and vanishes the next. The first report came in 1987, when a highway patrol officer swore he saw a gray two-story house during a late-night chase. He passed it once, but when he circled back minutes later, the desert was empty. Over the years, hikers, truck drivers, and wanderers reported the same sight, a lonely house with broken shutters, standing where nothing should be. Some claimed it glowed faintly under the moonlight, as though lit from within. A handful of brave souls entered. They described impossible architecture, staircases folding back into themselves, doors leading to brick walls, clocks that all tick backward. One man said he walked upstairs and came back to the same floor he left. But not everyone returned. In 2003, 3 urban explorers parked outside the house. Their vehicle was found days later, but the men were never seen again. Locals believe the house is not haunted at all, but something worse, a gateway. A place where reality is thin, and stepping inside means you may never step back out. The house that shouldn't exist doesn't terrify because of what's inside. It terrifies because it questions what's real at all. And with that final story, our journey through 10 of the most disturbing haunted houses reaches its chilling end. Each story reminds us that houses are not just wood and stone. They are vessels for memory, emotion, and sometimes entities beyond our understanding. Some hauntings echo sorrow. Others radiate anger. And some twist reality itself. But they all share one truth: the walls remember. Which of these haunted houses unsettled you the most? Was it the endless hallway, the angry spirit of Pine Hollow, or the vanishing house in the desert? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire the next episode. If you enjoyed this spine-tingling journey, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more terrifying tales from Ghostly Tales. Your support keeps these stories alive and ensures we can continue exploring the unknown. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and as always, stay spooky.